Hey there, Python programmers. Are you looking to understand the concept of scopes in Python? Well, you are in luck because today we are going to be discussing Python scopes and how they work. But before we dive into the code, let's talk about why understanding scopes is important. So, scopes determine the visibility and accessibility of variables in your code. It is important to understand scopes because they can affect how your variables are used and can even cause errors if you're not being careful. There are three types of scopes in Python: global, local, and built in. The global scope refers to variables that are defined at the top level of your code outside of any function or classes. These, these variables are available to be used anywhere in the code. Here is an example. So in this example, we have defined this variable x outside of the function called foo, right? In this case, this variable is available to all the code under below it, right? So that's why we are able to access this specific variable. If you run the code, okay, it's connecting, right? So even though we didn't define x inside the function definition, but still we are able to access it because it's a global variable. Okay, the local scope refers to variables that are defined inside a function or class. These variables are only available to be used in the function or in the class in which they're defined, right? So let's say if you want to define a local variable, let's call it x as well, and let's assign it a value of 20, right? Then if you run the code, we see a value of 20. This is basically using the variable defined inside the function. If you want to um, look at the global variable, right? So we will call the function and then we print x. So this x is not what we define inside the function, but rather it's the one that's defined above the function definition, and it's the global variable, right? So you see two different values. The first print statement is your local scope, and the second print statement is your global scope. There is a third type of scope, that is the built-in scope, which refers to variables that they are predefined in Python, such as you have the variable true, false, none, right? Uh, these variables are available to be used anywhere in the code because they are built in to the main Python module or library, right? So that there you have it. These are the three different type of scopes that you need to be aware of. Now that you understand uh, the different types of scopes in Python, let's talk about how to access variable from different scopes. If you want to access a variable from a different scope, you can use either local, either the global or non-local keywords. So let's look into those two. Here is our previous example with just one change, that we now want to uh, access the global variable inside the function foo, right? In this case, what we are trying to do is we are basically trying to modify the value of the global variable. So in order to do that, we will explicitly tell Python interpreter that we want to access the global variable, the global scope basically, right? So if you run this code, you will see now initially the value of the global variable was 10, right? However, inside this function definition, we are using the global scope, right, and updating its value to 20, and then we print the value. So once the function is executed, the value of 20 will be printed because that's where we assigned it to during the function call. However, since we're using the global scope, so we're using the global variable, that will also modify the value outside the function call, right? Because we wanted to modify the value in the global scope. So that's why you see 20 for this second print statement as well. Okay, I hope this makes sense. Now, let's look at a very interesting example of the non-local scope. So sometimes you might want to access a, a function, a variable which is not the global, but it's defined in like inside a nested loop. So a nested function, right? So we can do this using the non-local scope. The non local scope refers to variables that are defined in the nearest enclosing scope that is not global. This means that if you have a variable defined in a function and you want to access that variable from a nested function within that function, you can use the non-local keyword to do so. So let's look at an example. Right. So in this example, we have multiple instances of this x variable, right? So this one is the global variable, which is defined in the global scope. Then we have another one, which is, we define another x with a value of 10. This is the local scope to the outer function, right? Now we have a nested function called inner, right? And we want to access this specific x or variable x, right? We don't want to use the global one, but rather we want to use this specific x, right? So in order to do that, we can use this keyword non-local, right? Now this x will actually refer to the one defined in the outer scope, right? That's why it's not global. So we call it non-local. Okay, so in this course, basically what is happening is um, we are accessing x, right, then modifying its value. So now the x value is updated to 20, right, and printing that value. So if you call the inner function, it will print a value of 20. Then if we call the print function again, which is outside the inner function, but it has access to this instant definition, then it will also print 20, because inside the inner function we modify its value, right? So if you call the outer function, basically it will initially call the inner function, so prints the value of x. Next, there is an independent print statement, which again prints the value of x. The third or the last print statement is basically referring to our global variable, right? So even though we modified the value of x uh, uh, inside these two functions, they were referring to the local scope. Okay, so it doesn't have any impact on the value of x that is defined as a global variable. Okay, so let's run this code, and you see that here. So although we were expecting a value of 10, but we print the value of x, which is equal to 20. Then because of this non-local scope, so it has only access to uh, 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 the closest scope, which is like this outer function, right? So it modifies that value, but the global scope has not been modified at all. Okay, now if I simply comment this non-local scope, that means the value, the variable x is local to this inner function, right? So that's why it doesn't have any impact on the value of x in the outer function, which is, although the inner function is nested inside there, but it cannot modify, or like it doesn't have access to this variable definition. That's why you see like the inner function print statement returns 20, but the outer one returns, or like prints value of 10, right? Because it cannot be modified by the inner function, and the global variable remain the same. So just to summarize, the non-local keyword allows you to access the variable x from the nearest and closing scope that is not global. In this case, the variable is defined in the outer function, so it's accessible from the inner function through the use of non-local keyword. Okay, I hope this makes sense. Um, I hope this tutorial has helped you understand the concept of scopes in Python. Remember, understanding scopes is important because they determine the visibility and accessibility of variables in your code. By using the global and non-local keywords, you can access variables from different scopes you need. That's all for this video. I hope you enjoyed learning about Python scopes. If you have any questions or want to see more content, leave a comment below or check out my channel. Thanks for watching. Happy coding.